Hi, and welcome everybody. My name is Freddy, and this is another installment of Bookish, avec moi. and this past week, I have finished only one book, and that is a buddy read that I have with Kim from Becker's Books, and this one is Close Range Wyoming Stories by Annie Proulx. And this book is incredible. I loved it very much. I was really lucky to have found a really nice book. This is the second work by Annie Proulx that I read, and I had a really wonderful discussion with Kim about the stories in this book. This is a short story collection. Altogether, there are 11 stories in it, and I must say that there are stories, of course, that I couldn't exactly connect with. But for the most part, I like them. I even including the ones that I couldn't still until right now really understand fully. The writing was just beautiful in this book. It's um, it's wonderful. I just loved it so much. It made the week much better. And my most favorite story in this book is, of course, Brokeback Mountain. Essentially, the stories in here take place in rural Wyoming, and it's about how tough the life there can be, how the life tends to revolve around survival and securing a livelihood, and many of the characters they live at the ranch. So ranching life is a pretty common motif in all of these stories here, and so we see characters who have to rely on uh, farming and ranching in order to survive in their lives. And from my point of view, as someone who is not American and not from rural Wyoming, these things they appear really foreign to me. Seriously, most of the time, the stuff that we hear about cowboys are just, I don't know, gunslinging dudes riding horses. It is certainly very different from what I read in these stories. And here we see how the characters actually have to really struggle a lot in their daily lives, and how that affect their worldview, how that affect their attitude, and pretty much how it affects their relationships and their personalities also. So that's really fascinating, and I believe Wyoming Stories is actually part of a 3-book series, and I think I have one of it. I'm not sure when I'll be reading that one. That's fine just the way it is, but I'll certainly be picking that one up soon, because after reading this one, I just love it. And like I said earlier, my favorite story was Brokeback Mountain, and it's a love story. It's a romance, and it's a love story between these two cowboys, um, who appear like really masculine, but unlike the other stories in this book where we see the male characters, especially the male characters, having such hard time trying to express themselves emotionally. Finally, we have characters in Brokeback Mountain who are able to express what they're feelings. Um, but it's just that the feelings that they have towards each other, because the story takes place in the 60s, and the feelings that they have towards each other were essentially something that it's not safe for them to be, to go public with that kind of feeling, and they were struggling with that one, and I think that it portrayed that romance really beautifully. And even though it's a pretty sad story, overall I thought it was really beautiful. So that's it. I only finished one book this past week. I am still currently reading this one as a group read, organized by Leo from A Little Book Life, and this is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and this is the dust jacket. The book is somewhere. I'm not sure where I put it, but yeah, I have the dust jacket here. And this story is about he is struggling with self harm and the effects of the abuses that he received when he was a child. And in this story, we see how in the present his struggles are kind of affecting his relationships with the people around him, how his friends are trying to be there for him, and how their in general how their dynamics are um, while he is having this sort of crisis. The writing is pretty vivid in this book, and I love that. And I really appreciate the fact that this book talks very honestly about self-harm and mental illness, and we get to see that the um, logic that, despite being flawed, we get to see the kind of logic that Jude has in his head on why he's really justifying the actions, the self-destructive actions that he's doing on himself. And I've already reached halfway through this book, and I still have more to read. I'm still looking forward to see what will happen with Jude and all of the other characters in this book. It's pretty good book, and I'm kind of enjoying this book right now. So for the rest of the other books I'm currently reading, I have a few. Erica Jong's Fear of Flying. I actually didn't read much of this one this week because I put more focus on A Little Life and also the Annie Proulx short story collection. And then we have I'll Be Right There by Kyung Suk Shin, translated by Sora Kim Russell. This book is kind of depressing, and the cover kind of suggests that. So, yeah, it's I actually feel like reading something a little bit more uplifting, but I'll still continue with this one. And then also Restoration by Rose Tremaine, a historical fiction. And lastly, I've been reading more stories from Gold Boy, Emerald Girl, a short story collection by Yi Yun Lee. So far, from what I could gather from the stories in this one, it feels really feminine, and most of the characters are of women characters who are of Chinese descent or living in China. So generally, those are the books that I'm currently reading this week. Not much excitement, kind of the same like last week. But I have received book mail and new books coming in. Yeah, I am so happy about that. There are a few. The first one that I got was Train to Pakistan by Kushwan Singh. And this one I bought was because we are going to have a group read organized by Jyotsna, and that is happening in October. But I got it early, which is good because usually ordering books, especially new ones, tend to take some time, and that's kind of annoying. Some of the books that I received this past week include also this classic. I've always been wanting to read this book. It's Hermann Hesse. This one is Siddhartha, and I just I've always been wanting to read this one, but I've never really seen it at the store. So yeah, and it's a pretty small book. I think I could finish this pretty quickly. And next one is a book by Ian Lienke. This is Dream of Ding Village. And I was kind of interested about this book after reading the blurb. And here it goes. The seminal novel tells the tragic and shocking story of the blood contamination scandal in China's Henan province. Villagers coerced into selling vast quantities of blood for money are infected with the AIDS virus after being injected with plasma to prevent anemia. Whole villages are wiped out as the sickness spreads, with no responsibility taken or reparation made. So that's kind of scary and kind of interesting. I've also been getting like a few war fiction. Um, Specifically, there are two of them, and both of these were actually Booker Prize winners in the past. The first one is actually part of a trilogy, and I just realized that after I got it. And apparently, it is the third book in the trilogy. I wonder if it would work if I read this book first. And it's by Pat Barker, The Ghost Road, 1918. The closing months of the war, Army psychiatrist William Rivers is increasingly concerned for the men who have been in his care, particularly Billy Pryor, who is about to return to combat in France with young poet Wilfred Owens. As Rivers tries to make sense of what, if anything, he has done to help these injured men, Pryor and Owen await the final battles in a war that has decimated a generation. Another one is The Narrow Road to the Deep North, and this one is by Richard Flanagan. In the despair of a Japanese POW camp on the Burma Death Railway, Sergeant Dorigo Evans is haunted by his love affair by his uncle's young wife 2 years earlier. Struggling to save the men under his command from starvation, from cholera, from beatings, he receives a letter that will change his life forever. And of course, change his life forever. That always works in a blurb. So those are the books that I've gotten this past week. Really, really good week. Last week I actually went to KL, Kuala Lumpur, the capital, to see my sister because we were celebrating her birthday, and we had a good time. We had dinner at a Korean restaurant, and we watched Mulan, and that was fun because that was the first time I actually felt this sense of nostalgia whenever someone watches a live action Disney cartoon remake. I've never really experienced that sense of nostalgia that people always talk about with other live action remake, because Mulan was one of the few cartoons that I watched when I was a kid. I've never really watched the other cartoons, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin. I've never watched Lion King cartoon as well, so I wouldn't know how that felt. But with Mulan, it was great. And the other cartoon that I watched as a kid, a Disney cartoon, was Tarzan. So I think I probably have that feeling if they ever do a live action remake of Tarzan. And overall we had fun. And then after the movie, we had like late night burgers and stuff like that. So it's good. So that's it for my bookish life this past week. Nothing much really interesting. And I hope I could actually finish a few novels, maybe one or two this week. I'm looking forward to that. And I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care, bye bye, and thank you for watching.